Hey there, how's it going everybody? So in today's tutorial we're going to be learning how to geocode a batch of addresses. So what I have here is I've got a CSV file which is named geocoding dataset, which contains the districts which are within Zimbabwe. So the districts are named according to the convention which is currently being used in Zimbabwe, and so at the moment they don't have any coordinates attached to them, so they're a bit difficult for us to be able to plot out a map. So what we're going to be doing in this tutorial is we're going to be performing a batch geocoding. So we're going to be geocoding all these CSV files. Okay, so just like in other tutorial that we've been through, the first thing that we need to do is we need to connect to our GIS. So I'm just going to type in some markdown here. So I'm just going to say connect to GIS. And then in order for us to connect to GIS, I think I've gone through most of these steps that we need to do whenever we are beginning a GIS project, but I'm basically going to explain one of the libraries that I'm going to be importing here for the benefit of this tutorial. So let me just type this out. So I'm just going to import ArcGIS.gis, import GIS, and then from ArcGIS.geocoding, import batch geocode, then from git pass import pass. Okay, so most of you that have gone through the other tutorials have a basic understanding of most of these libraries, but then if you have noticed that I've imported a new library here, so this library is just basically going to help us perform most of the geocoding tasks which are going to be performed within this tutorial. Okay, so now that we have stated everything that we need for this tutorial, I'm just going to run this so that it begins the importation process. And while it's running, I'm just going to be typing out the next step of the phase, that is actually logging in. So I'm just going to type in the login information so that we don't waste any time while we're waiting for this process to end. And then I'm just going to type in the URL to the ArcGIS online platform, and then I'm just going to type in my username. It's going to be African Surveyors, but most of you guys, I know you have accounts with the ArcGIS online platform, so you basically have to use your own accounts here with your username. And then once you tap enter, and then you're prompted to enter your password. So I'm not sure why it hasn't finished importing all those libraries. I think it's my network, but let me just wait for a little bit and then we can get to move on with the tutorial. Okay, so now that most of the libraries, like all the libraries actually have been imported, as you can see we now have a digit on our sub block. So now we need to run this sub block is below. Is going to help us log into our account. So I'm just going to execute that. So here's an easy trick for you guys to execute this without having to go over and clicking here. So on my Windows machine, I just have to press Alt and Enter. I'm not sure what you guys will use, Mac or Ubuntu really use, but I think it's still the same. So I'm just going to enter in my password in order for us to log into our account. And then I'm just going to press Enter, and then it's going to authenticate my credentials to make sure I'm the current user. So yeah, that was a success. Okay, so I'm just going to show you guys a little trick here that you can do. So since we've imported a new library here, and most of you guys are now confused on how you can use this library, there's a trick which comes embedded with these libraries, this API, which you can use. So let's say I want to know what this library really does. I can just basically type the name of the library, and then I put a question mark, and then whenever I execute that, it's going to print out oops, I think something went wrong. Oh, yeah, I typed this as markdown language. I'm supposed to put it as code. Sorry for that. So okay, I typed this as code, and then when I execute that, it's going to give me like all the like much of the documentation with regards to that library which I just stated. So as you can see here, we have a lot of syntax, and we have a lot of words here which describe Okay, so in this tutorial, I'm not gonna explain all this to you guys. So you basically just need to read this documentation. So I'm just gonna close that, and then we're gonna continue with this tutorial. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to remember I said I had a file which contains all the addresses which I need to geocode. Okay, so the file is located in my system. So now what I need to do here is I need to specify the resources which I'm going to be using for this tutorial. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some markdown here, and then I'm going to type define resources like that, and then I'm just gonna basically going to run that. And then now what I need to do is I need to specify an input file and an output file. So the input file is actually currently in my system, so I'm just going to specify the URL to that file. So I'm just going to define a variable here which is going to store the path to that file. So I'm just going to type it as an input variable. So as an input file, the name of the variable, and then I'm going to put R in order for us to capture the path of that. So I'm just going to navigate to my folder, and then I'm just going to highlight this, and then I'm just going to click on copy path, and it's going to copy the path of that file. And then I'm going to come into my notebooks, and then I'm basically just going to paste this. So I'm going to comment out this and type it as my source data. And then now what we need to do now is we need to specify an output file. So I'm just going to name this accordingly so that we don't get confused. So in order for us to get our output file, now we say output file is equal to CSV1, and then is equal to R, and then we specify a path. So I'm just going to specify the same path to that, but I'm just going to specify a different name for that file, because I obviously need the file to be stored in this same location, but it's going to be having a different name now. Okay, so if you've noticed, these datasets are basically the same as of now. So as you've seen, our source file is named geocoding dataset. So I think I'm just going to rename this output file to, maybe I'm just going to say geocoded output data, and then it's going to be stored within the same location which we have our initial data. So as you can see right now we have only 3 files, and when we're done with this tutorial we're going to be having 4 files. So let's just comment out this and say this is going to be output file which doesn't exist yet. Please take note that this file does not exist yet, and our code is actually going to create this file when we need it. Okay, so with that declared, I'm just going to execute this cell, and then we move on to the next cell. Okay, so now what we need to do is, since we have our data set, we now need to tell Python that we have a column which contains addresses which you want to use. Okay, so to do that, let me just do some markdown a bit so that we don't get lost along the way. So I'm just going to say specify column for addresses. So I'm just going to specify a column is going to contain addresses, and I already know I've already opened this dataset within my machine, so I already know which column to use. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'm also going to open this dataset later on so that you guys see what I've just did. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to define a variable, and I'm going to call it address column name, and then I'm gonna type in the name of the column which contains the addresses. So this name is basically the name of the column which contains the names of the districts which are within Zimbabwe. Okay, so now that I've assigned a variable to that column, now what we need to do is I'm just gonna read the data so that I show you how the data looks like. So I'm just gonna execute this, and then I'm just gonna create a markdown again, and then I'm just gonna say read data. So in order for us to read the data, I talked about this in the previous, actually it was the first tutorial that we did when we're introducing you to the ArcGIS Python API. So we're just gonna repeat that again. So now in order for us to read this data, I'm just gonna define a variable data, and then pass in the functions from our pandas. So I'm just gonna call pandas to read Oops, I think I typed that at the wrong place. So to read the CSV file which we have stored within this input file variable. So I'm just gonna call the input file variable. So please bear in mind that this input file variable contains the path, so that we do not have to keep typing that path over and over again. And I'm basically going to tell this that it's encoded in UTF-8, and then I'm going to call in the data so that it displays to us the data which we have right here. So I'm just going to execute that and wait for it to render, and then it is displayed like all the data. So as you can see, we've named our column with the name district, because district is actually the real name of the column which is here, which contains the names of these of this district. Okay, so let me just go back here, and then so now that you guys have actually seen this data, what I need to do is so let's just say if we had I'm just going to do this part so that you guys know how you can be able to fix your data. So let's just assume that within this district within this district column, we had a row which was missing some data. As you can see, there are other rows which are in here which contain NaN, which basically means there's nothing in that row. So what if this was the same within our district, but then we wanted to geocode these addresses? So it would be best for us to actually try and geocode like a row which doesn't contain anything, because it's just basically going to produce some errors. So in order for us to do that, we need to fill in like the missing data. So we need to find like a default for us to do that. So I'm just gonna type that as markdown, fill in missing data, and then I run that. So in order for us to fill in the missing data, remember we declared a variable data which basically contains our data which we just displayed. So in order for us to alter this data, we need to call back that variable, and then we tell it that we want to alter this column district, and then we also call back that variable again and tell it we need to alter district again. I'm not sure why we have to put repetition here, but that's the standard convention of doing this. And then we need to type in a function which is called fill name. So and then we tell it give it like a default for this. So let's just say if we didn't have if we had a row which had some missing data. So what this function was basically going to do was to replace like the missing field with the default. So I'm just going to name the default Zimbabwe here, and then we actually need to see how this is going to look like. So I'm not going to execute this block yet, because if I do that, there's nothing which is going to change since we do not have any missing values within our district column. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use another column instead for the sake of this tutorial. So let's assume that this was the name of the country, and this name of the country, as you can see, we have NaN, which basically means that there's nothing in these columns. So let's just say I wanted to fill out these columns with some default data. So what I need to do is I only need to copy the name of the column, and then I come here and I replace that district with the name of the column. So now I replace the district with the name of the column, and if I execute this, you're going to notice that all these NAs will be gone, and we now have the name of the default which we just specified here to be Zimbabwe. So let me just execute this so that you guys actually see what I'm talking about. So I've executed that, and then you see now in that column we now have our default name, which is Zimbabwe. Okay, so now that we have replaced that data, we now need to take one more step in order for us to actually verify that this data has been replaced and the column which we're going to be using does not have any missing data. So to do that, we just need to verify data, and then so now we need to pick a column which is going to represent our location. So in our case, we're going to be using this district. So I'm just going to copy the name of the district column, and then we're just going to go back here. Oops, actually I didn't have to copy that because this name of the district was actually stored in a variable which I named address column name. So I have to copy this variable for us to use it in the next step. Okay, so I need to verify this. So in order for us to do that, we need to put a condition which is going to be if, and I paste the name of that variable which stores out the name of the column. Not is not in our data dot columns, and then I put in the column there, and then if so basically what this is saying is if this column name is an empty row, it needs to tell us that there's an empty row, and that in order for us to tell us, I have to raise a value error, and then I give ourselves an output which is going to be displayed if we have any missing data. So I'm just going to say missing address column in input data. So if we have any missing value in our input data, it's basically going to display this message. So let's just check if we have any missing data, and I'm just going to run that block, and then we see that there's no output here, but the cell is finished executing, which basically means that we do not have any errors. So in order for us to be actually sure, I could have put an if statement here which could render some output, but I didn't have to waste time in doing that. I just needed to know if there were any errors. But for the sake of programming sake and practicing, you could also use like if statements. Okay, so let's just move on to the next phase. Okay, so in our next phase, what we need to do is we need to create sort of like a list which is going to help the geocoding service for it to easily do its job. So as you can see here, we have a column for district, and we also have a column for province. So I'm just going to take, for example, here we have a district named Buhera, and then we have a province named Manicaland. So I'm just going to help our geocoding service easily identify this location by putting this first and then this second. So what it's going to do is it's going to go into Manicaland first, and then within Manicaland it's now going to look for Buhera. It's going to make the process a little bit faster. Okay, so let's just type in the basic query which is going to help us put this in a list. So let me just say right here, I'm just going to put this into Markdown, and then I'm just going to say format address to list, and then I'm just going to run that. And then in order for us to format this into a list, I'm just going to declare a new variable. It's going to be called addresses, and it's going to be equal to our data which are already defined, and then within that data we're going to specify the column which is already stored. So I'm just going to pass in the address column name, and then I'm just going to put it so that it acts as a string, and then I'm going to put a plus, and then I'm going to separate this with a comma, and then I'm going to put now the name of the province. So I'm just going to call data again, and then I put the name of the column which contains the names of the provinces, and then I'm just going to put a full stop and call in the toList function, which is basically going to put this into a list, and then now I need to display this as an output. So yeah, so this is basically the whole query which is going to convert this into a list. So let's just execute that and see what it's going to look like. So I've executed that, and then it's going to look like this. So this is the name of the district separated by a comma and the name of the province. So this is basically going to help easily put these it's going to help easily like geocode, like the geocoding service, to easily identify these locations. So I just need to do one thing here which is going to help us actually verify our data. So I just need to print the length of this data so that we are able to see how much data we have. And then you see that we have 60 rows within this data. So the reason why I did this in the initial stages, I'm going to be explaining to you when we're going to be verifying something later within this tutorial. So now that we've put our addresses into a list, we now need to move on to the part that we've all been waiting for, which is the geocoding part. So now what you need to do is you now need to geocode all these addresses. So in order to do that, I'm just going to type another markdown. I'm just going to type geocode them, and then I'm just going to run that. So in order for us to geocode this, we need to declare a variable which is going to store all the results of our geocoding process. So the first variable name that I chose was actually the result. So I'm just going to declare that result, and then I'm just going to call in now the batch geocode method and pass in the addresses as a parameter. So this addresses is this whole list of addresses which I have combined into a list for the service to easily find these addresses. And then now what I need to do is I'm gonna need to call the length again and print the length of these results this time. So I'm just gonna execute this, and while it's executing, so now it's actually going to geocode all those addresses. So the reason why I called this length addresses now is that it needs to have the same match with these initial addresses which have not been geocoded. So as you can see, we have produced 60 rows of geocoded items, again same as these initial items which are not geocoded. So this basically means that every address which was within this list is actually been assigned to a coordinate, which is actually a great thing. But if this item was actually less or more, then that means we had a problem along the way and some addresses could not be found. Okay, so now we now need to visualize these geocoded items. So I'm just going to type in markdown again and then visualize the results, and then I'm just going to execute that. So the best way to visualize this is a map. So I'm just going to call in a map, and then gis.map, and then I'm just going to center it on Zimbabwe since we are dealing with the Zimbabwean data. And then I'm going to give that a zoom of 8, so a zoom of 7, and then I'm going to call in the map function again for us to see the map on the screen, and then I'm just going to execute that. Okay, so let's just display the map on the screen. So I'm just going to give that a second while it's actually executing the map. Oops, that was a bit fast, so it's trying to render in the base map for that. Okay, so as you can see now, the map is rendered. It's just a base map without anything because we haven't passed any parameters yet. So now what we need to do is we need to add our geocoded dataset to this map so that we are able to visualize all the points that we've just geocoded on this map. So let me just put some mark down here so that we don't forget whatever we're doing. So I'm just gonna draw points on map. So on map. So I'm just going to introduce to you something special here. I'm going to be adding a pop-up to these to this map. So I'm just going to say add pop-up. So basically a pop-up is a function that allows us to actually see what detail a map polygon line and point are actually contained. So I'm just going to be typing in code for that. So in order for us to display a pop-up, we need to actually loop through all the points. So as you can see now, we have 60 points here. So I'm just going to loop through all these points in order for us to create a pop-up. So the best thing to do now is we need to create a for loop. So we're just going to address that. So for address in results. So remember, our result is the variable which contains all the geocoded information result from the batch of the addresses. So I'm just gonna call it for address in result. So what do I need to do with that? I need to call in the pop-up item, and then the pop-up here, and then I assign it. It's basically written now in as a JSON file. So I'm just gonna put that in JSON format, and then I'm gonna define a title for the pop-up. And then what I need this title to contain, so since every point has a name, so the best thing to do for a title would be to specify the name of the point, or the name, or should I say the name of the district as the title. So I'm just going to pass in the name of the district. So remember, I'm just going to call in address right there, and then we need to call in the name of the point that we're currently at. So I'm just going to call in the attributes there, and then we call in another square bracket and then short label like that, and then I'm just going to pass in a comma, and then now I need a little content to display within my pop-up. So I do not have any much content to display, so I'm just going to be showing you how pop-ups work. So for this one, I'm just going to specify that this is district name. I'm going to put that out point. So this is going to be passed as a string, and then now we need to assign something to that string. So I'm just going to put a plus sign. So you need to know that this plus sign acts as a way that we're going to be adding something else here. So this is normally done especially when we have defined our own static string, and now we need to collect something which is within our data. That's when we add the plus, so that we don't end up mixing these things. So I'm just going to add that attribute again, and then it's going to be attribute, and then it's going to be another square bracket again, and then it's going to be short label. So I know this is quite a lot of it's quite a lot of stuff to do. So basically you can just do what we did here in order for you to get to know the syntax whenever we're going to be creating these pop-ups. You can check that out in the API documentation over the official Esri website, so that you see how you can get to write these things out. Okay, so now what we need to do, I think this is the correct syntax, and then we have closed our pop-up JSON return string here, and then now we have to specify that we need to add this to the map. So I'm just going to call in the map variable again, and then we need to tell it that we need to draw this. So I'm just going to pass in the address, which is going to be within our location, and then we need to tell it that this is going to be pop-up. Okay, so now that's it. And so this is basically how we declare a pop-up. So I'm just going to execute this, and so that we see how it's going to look like within our map. So I'm just going to run that. Okay, so I've successfully run that. So now we need to refer back to our map. As you can see now, our map initially did not have any small little circles like the ones that we have right now. So in order for us to verify if our pop-up works, I'm just going to click on one bubble here. So I'm just going to click on this one. It's supposed to render the same output we have just defined here. So as you can see now, the title of this is actually the name of the district. And then I have told it that I've added a few content here, which is district name, which is a static, which is also named here, and that static is linked to this attribute, which is within our data, which is also the name of the district. So this is basically how you can get to call a few pop-ups within your data. Okay, so now what I need to do is I need to format all these as you can see, so far we haven't actually seen the coordinates within a table. So now what we need to do is we need to format these coordinates, these geocoded coordinates, into a table. So I'm just gonna say just need to format geocoded coordinates to table. So I'm basically going to run that and then see what we need to do. Okay, so now what I need to do is I'm going to define a variable which is going to be, we're going to store the latitude and the longitude coordinates, and then I'm going to put this into a list. So in order for us to do that, I'm going to declare the variable here, lat codes, and then I'm going to put it as an empty list for now. So I've placed this as an empty list for now. Then I'm going to do the same for the longitude, put long codes, and then I'm going to declare an empty list. So what's going to happen here is every time this function, the function which we're going to write below is going to run. It's going to be appending each and every coordinate to these two variables which I have declared to be lists. So now what we need to do is we need to loop through all the names and all the coordinates that we've just geocoded. So now I'm going to declare a for loop. It's going to say for coordinates in results. I put a column there. Remember, results stores all the geocoded names of the districts within Zimbabwe. So I'm just going to loop that, and then I'm going to declare a variable which is going to be latitude, and we're just going to store some of the information here. So I'm just going to put that into a string. By opening this quotes, and then I'm going to open the curly braces, and then I'm going to put a colon and a full stop and put 3f. So basically 3f basically means that this value is going to be to three significant figures. So I'm just gonna go out of the quotes, and then I put a full stop, and then I put format function, and then I declare that this is going to be a float, which is going to be converted from an integer, which is going to contain the coordinates which are precise to a location. And then this location is going to be a y coordinate. So, and then I'm going to multiply that by 100. So, and then after multiplying by 100, then I'm going to divide that also by 100. So this is basically like the regular expression. Okay, so basically this is just a regular expression. It's going to help us store the name of the latitude. So store the latitude and the longitude. So now I'm going to be doing for the longitude now, and then I don't have to go over and type this again. So I'm just going to copy that, and then I'm going to paste it into there. And the only thing that I need to change now is I need to change this to X. And yeah, so that's basically what I need to change. And then now what I need to do is I need to tell it that I'm going to say, hey, remember my latitude string which was above there. Now what I need to do is I need to append whatever is being looped through within my latitude regular expression. And I'm going to be doing that for the longitude, and then call the append, and then this time it's going to be the longitude. Okay, so that's it. And then this is actually going to create a field which is going to be named long codes and lat codes. So let me just execute that. So it has finished executing. So as of now, we're not able to see like the data physically or yes, electronically. So let me just write down a function which is going to help us to actually visualize like these changes. So I'm just going to pass in data, and then I put some curly braces there, and then it's going to be long. Actually, this function is going to create now the column which is going to be storing this, because right now like what I did here in this previous cell, I just stored like the coordinates into the list which are the latitude list and the longitude list, but they aren't in the tables yet. So now this function which I'm going to be using right now is going to actually store this in the table. So let me just add a cell block below, and then I put some markdown here. So let me just say add coordinates as columns. So I'm just going to declare this column to be called long, which is going to store the long code. It's going to store this list which contains coordinates, and I'll do that for the latitude one. So I'm just going to call that lat, which is equal to lat chords. And then I'm going to display this data. So I'm just going to call the head function to display only the first 30 records of this data, and then I'm just going to execute that. Wow, so as you can see now, we now have 2 new columns within our data. So basically the name which you give here is the name which is going to be created for this new column. So as you can see here, we have our long and then we have lat, because these columns didn't actually exist, so they were created for this data set. Okay, so now we're left with one more step. Remember, I promised you that this location was going to contain 4 files. So now let's go through the last step, which is going to be actually writing this new data set to a file. So I'm just going to put some markdown there. And then I'm just going to write data with coordinates to file. So that's it, and then we execute that block. Okay, so remember, so what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be calling now the pandas. So I'm going to be like, hey pandas, remember that data frame that we have, and the data which was within the data frame. I now need a CSV, and I now need you to convert this data frame to a CSV. And then remember that output location that we defined at the beginning of this tutorial, which was this output file, which had like a different name. So I'm just gonna say, hey pandas, remember that, see this data frame with the data contained in this, I now need you to convert that into a CSV, and remember the location that we defined at the beginning there, I need you to save it as this into this same location. So, and then I also need you to encode this as a UTF. So I'm just going to specify UTF 8/3, and then I need you to print out the length of the results for me, so that I'm sure that I still have 60 rows within my data set. So I'm just going to execute that, and then yes, we still have 60 rows. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to this location and show you all the changes that have been made. So I'll navigate it back to our location. So now you can see that we now have a new file which contains the coordinates which you have just assigned to each and every name of a district. So as you can see, it's named geocoded output data. So basically this is how you run through the batch geocoding process when you have a CSV file. So I hope this tutorial was useful for those guys who love to do run a bit of some geocoding. So basically you can get to use this as a template within your organization or for personal use, in order for you guys to do like a geocoding process like this, which contains like a CSV file which just has like names of locations. So I hope this tutorial was very useful. Please like, share and subscribe to the channel in order for us to keep making more of these videos. And thank